The sea, it's just vast, mysterious, isn't it? A source of life, ancient traditions. But beneath that immense surface, even with all its beauty, it faces some very real limits. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something incredibly vital, the whole philosophy and practice of sustainable fishing for amateurs. We're not talking about the huge industrial fleets, not the commercial trawlers, but how you, as an individual, someone who fishes maybe for sustenance or for family tradition or maybe just for that connection to nature, how you can do that with wisdom and care and actually make a positive impact. We're drawing our insights today from this incredibly thoughtful guide. It's called Take Only What You Need, a guide to sustainable fishing for amateurs, and it's produced by Merman Conservation Expeditions Ltd. Our mission here is really to distill the core wisdom from this guide, to help us all reconnect with a natural balance that, often gets lost in our modern world, and hopefully equip you listening with both the mindset and the practical tools to really honor the sea. This isn't just some technical manual, right? It's a conservation message, deeply rooted in tradition, in ethics. Take only what you need, leave the rest for the sea. That's the essence. And what's really remarkable is how broad the relevance of this guide is. It speaks to residents of remote communities, recreational fishers, environmental educators, even young people just learning fishing skills. It's truly for anyone who values nature and wants to avoid causing harm.
Yeah, and what really struck me in the guide about that core problem you mentioned is how it highlights that the oceans, they look boundless, right? But they are showing clear signs of fatigue. Overfishing isn't just, fewer fish in your favorite spot. It's bigger. It's an ecological crisis that sends these ripples through entire, very delicate systems. When certain fish stocks collapse, well, the consequences just cascade downwards. You start to see apex predators losing their main food source.
Right.
You see coral reefs getting smothered because the fish that graze algae are gone, seabirds struggling to feed their young, and entire coastal communities potentially losing not just food, but their actual cultural identity tied to the sea. And while those massive industrial trawlers, they definitely bear the biggest weight of responsibility for global declines.
Sure, the sheer scale is different.
Exactly. But it's absolutely crucial to understand that even small-scale fishing, individual fishing, if it's thoughtless, it can still tip delicate local ecosystems into decline. You have to think of every fish you catch, not just as, a meal, but as a vital cog in this huge interconnected marine machine.
That's a powerful image.
It is. Your single act, if it's misinformed, isn't just taking one fish. It's a ripple. It could starve a predator or help unleash an algal bloom on a reef. That's a sort of hidden system-wide consequence. And the sea doesn't just bounce back overnight. Lots of species, think groupers, sharks. They live a long time. They take years to mature. They reproduce slowly. So that picture of an abundant ocean, teeming with small schools, it could be really deceiving if it's hiding the absence of those key foundation species that hold the whole thing together. But by really understanding these hidden costs, every single fisher, every individual gains this profound power to help protect the sea for generations to come.
Okay, so this whole idea of the ocean's finite limits, it really seems to boil down to this core principle from the guide. Take only what you need. And that's not just like a rule for your catch limit, is it? It feels more like a whole philosophy for how we relate to nature.
Exactly. It's a relationship.
We often forget the sea isn't some endless vending machine. It's a living system, right? With its own rhythms, its own finite capacity. But how do we, as individuals out on the water, how do we actually sense when we might be pushing those boundaries? What are the clues?
Well, the signs of strain are often subtle. Especially at first, maybe if you're not looking closely. You might start noticing the fish you catch are consistently smaller than they used to be.
Okay.
Or they become much harder to find in your usual spots. Or maybe certain species you used to see pretty regularly are now rare or even just gone. People in remote communities, the ones who live really intimately with the environment day in, day out, they often pick up on these subtle shifts long before scientists even measure them.
That local knowledge is key.
It's invaluable, and it needs to be honored. So taking only what you need, yes, it's an act of restraint, absolutely. But it's also a powerful act of protection. It means leaving enough behind, enough for the species to survive, to reproduce, letting the small fish grow up, and just understanding that nature's ability to give is conditional. It's not infinite. And this brings up an important distinction, doesn't it? The difference between need and greed when you're out there.
Right. How do you define that?
Well, need is pretty honest, usually clear. It's driven by genuine hunger, maybe providing for your family, by a desire to use what the sea offers wisely, without waste. Greed, though, that's more careless. It might stem from just habit, Or maybe the fleeting thrill of taking more than you can possibly use. Or that false idea that more is always better.
Yeah, the supermarket mentality.
Exactly. The sea isn't a supermarket aisle. What you take isn't restocked by morning. Fishing out of greed might feel good for a moment, but it inevitably creates long-term damage to the community, the habitat, the very fish you hope to find next time. So asking yourself honestly, is this truly needed right now? Am I taking more than my fair share? These aren't signs of weakness. They're actually the hallmark of real wisdom, real respect.
That point about need versus greed is really powerful. It makes me wonder, though, in today's world, with all our, modern science and fancy gear, how relevant is that older traditional knowledge? Were those old ways genuinely sustainable, or is there maybe a risk we're romanticizing the past a bit? How can we blend that humility and wisdom with what we know scientifically now?
That's a really vital question. Traditional knowledge isn't about romanticizing. It's built on literally millennia of empirical observation, hands-on learning. It was based on this incredibly intimate understanding of seasons, tides, fish behavior, and a deep inherent respect for nature's rhythms. Often these were unwritten rules, but they were strictly followed. Things like consistently avoiding taking young fish,
Right.
leaving certain known spawning grounds completely untouched, practicing sharing catches within the community, which actually reduced the overall pressure, and using selective methods, spears, certain types of lines that minimized harm to things they weren't targeting.
Passed down by example, mostly.
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
Taught by doing, by watching elders. And it absolutely can be revived by truly listening to elders still around, by digging into local history. Subsistence fishing, in its purest form, really serves as a powerful model for living in rhythm with the environment, taking only what's genuinely needed without harming the future. Restoring that balance requires, well, profound humility. Sometimes that's even more important than just the latest science.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the problems and the underlying philosophy. Let's shift gears a bit towards solutions. When we think about fishing's impact, it's easy to focus on the industrial giants, those huge nets. But what about someone like me? Just out with a simple rod and reel on a weekend. Can individual amateur fishing actually make a positive difference? Or is our impact always just, well, negligible compared to the big players?
That's precisely where the unique power of amateur fishing lies. When it's practiced with awareness, with moderation, it is inherently far less destructive than industrial operations. The core difference really comes down to scale, method, and crucially, intention.
Intention, okay.
Industrial operations are designed purely for maximum yield. They often result in huge amounts of bycatch, the accidental capture of turtles, seabirds, other fish, which are then just discarded. Amateur fishing, on the other hand, typically uses simpler tools, hand lines, rods, maybe spear guns. And the catch is usually personal, for your table, not for commercial profit. This smaller, more focused footprint gives it immense potential for sustainability. But here's the crucial bit. This sustainability isn't automatic. It depends entirely on the individual's mindset, your choices.
Right, it's not guaranteed just because you're not a trawler.
Exactly. Even one person with a rod can cause real local damage if they, say, consistently remove the large, reproductively vital breeding fish, or just take too many fish in a short period from one small area. The real strength of amateur fishers is their closeness, their personal connection to the marine environment. You have this unique opportunity to protect marine life precisely because you are right there. You can see the changes, adapt to seasons, observe conditions firsthand, and make those personal, responsible choices that contribute directly to local conservation.
You mentioned earlier those subtle signs, like fish getting smaller. But what about specific species, the ones we really need to be careful with? For the average person out on the water, what's the simplest, most practical way to quickly identify a vulnerable species or know, okay, this one should go back without needing, a PhD in marine biology?
Yeah, that's key. The sea is full of life, but not all species are equally robust, right? Some are just inherently more vulnerable. Maybe they reproduce really slowly or play a very specific role, or their habitat is shrinking. When these species get caught, even if it's by accident, the damage can be incredibly long-lasting. So step one is definitely trying to learn which species are considered at risk in your local area. Common examples might be certain types of groupers, sharks, rays. It varies region to region.
And ethics matter beyond just the law.
Absolutely. Ethical fishing often goes way beyond what's merely legal. Just because you can legally keep a certain fish doesn't always mean you should, especially if you know its population is struggling locally. I remember this one time, actually. I was out with an elder fisherman, a real expert. We caught this beautiful snapper, perfectly legal size, everything by the book. But he just took one look at its belly, sort of gently felt it, whispered something like, full of life, and carefully put it back.
Wow.
He explained it was peak breeding season for them, and that one fish likely held hundreds of thousands of potential future fish. That moment really stuck with me. Sometimes the true wisdom is in what you don't take.
That says it all.
So to avoid harm, yeah, get a simple local ID guide if you can. Pay attention to size and shape. And honestly, if you're ever unsure about what you've caught, the safest, most respectful bet is always to release it carefully. And extend that consideration beyond fish too. Think about sea turtles nesting seabirds near the coast. Every single action out there should be measured by its overall impact, not just the immediate reward.
That story really drives the point home. And building on that idea of timing, what about those critical periods? Why is respecting breeding seasons and no-catch periods so absolutely vital for the ocean's health?
It's fundamental, really, because catching fish during their breeding season can literally wipe out entire future generations before they even have a chance to start.
You're taking the parents and the potential offspring.
Exactly. Those official closures you see sometimes, they aren't just arbitrary dates. They're based on solid biological studies that pinpoint when fish are most vulnerable, often when they gather in large numbers, maybe in shallower waters, specifically to spawn. But even if there isn't an official closure in place for a species or area, you can still observe nature yourself.
Use your own eyes.
Right. If you notice large groups of a certain species suddenly appearing, or fish looking particularly swollen around the belly, or acting kind of sluggish and preoccupied during a particular month, these are usually clear signs of breeding activity. The best thing to do then is just avoid fishing those specific spots or targeting those species during that time. Letting them complete their reproductive cycle isn't just, being nice. It's a direct investment in future fish stocks. It helps guarantee more healthy populations for the seasons ahead.
Okay, so if we want to make sure we're making those responsible choices, avoiding sensitive times, what are some of the most sustainable fishing techniques that actually empower this kind of mindful approach? What gear should we be thinking about?
Well, there are several low-impact methods that really stand out in the guide and in practice. Hand lines, for instance. They're one of the oldest, simplest ways to fish. They give you maximum control, a real one-to-one interaction with the fish. This generally leads to significantly less bycatch and minimal damage to the seafloor compared to nets or traps.
More direct connection.
Very direct. Then you have fishing rods, especially, and this is important, when paired with things like circle hooks. Those hooks are designed differently. They tend to catch the fish right in the corner of the mouth, which makes for a much easier, less harmful release if needed.
Yeah, okay. Less chance of deep hooking.
Precisely. And rods also give you a better underwater feel,
Yeah.
You can often judge a fish's size or even guess a species by how it fights before you even see it. And finally, there's spear fishing. Done correctly, it's perhaps the most selective method there is.
Because you see exactly what you're targeting.
Exactly. It virtually eliminates bycatch. But, and this is but it demands considerable skill, patience, and really deep knowledge of species identification and behavior. It's not for beginners usually. The common thread, the strength shared by all these methods, they fundamentally allow for conscious choice. They promote ethical fishing over just pure efficiency or catching the most volume. They put the control and the responsibility back in your hands. And when it comes to actually avoiding bycatch and minimizing damage, even with these methods, well, the consequences can still be serious if you're not careful. First, as we said, always know your local species, which ones are protected, which ones reproduce slowly. That knowledge is baseline. Then use selective gear. Choose hooks appropriate for the size of fish you're actually hoping to catch, not just the biggest hook you have. Avoid using multiple hooks on one line if possible. That just increases the chance of snagging something unwanted.
Makes sense.
When you get a bite, try to retrieve your line or the catch as soon as you reasonably can. Don't leave baited hooks sitting out there unattended for long periods. That's asking for a protected species like a turtle to grab it.
Yeah.
If you do catch something you don't want or can't keep, handle it gently, always with wet hands.
Why wet hands?
Dry hands remove the fish's natural protective slime coating, which leaves it vulnerable to infection once released. So wet hands always. If the hook is swallowed deep, it's often far, far better to simply cut the line as close to the mouth as possible, rather than trying to dig it out and causing potentially fatal internal damage.
Better to leave the hook than kill the fish trying to remove it.
Exactly. And critically important, avoid fishing directly in fragile ecosystems. Think seagrass beds or living coral reefs. Even dropping a heavy sinker repeatedly in those areas can cause significant, long-lasting habitat damage.
That's a great reminder that our impact isn't just about the fish themselves, but the whole environment they live in, moving beyond the actual act of catching. What about the gear itself? What's the role of proper gear maintenance and reuse in this whole picture? Seems less direct, maybe?
It might seem less direct, but it's actually a huge piece of the puzzle. Poorly maintained, or worse, discarded fishing gear becomes marine litter. And that is a massive global problem.
Ghost nets and lost lines.
Precisely. Monofilament line, hooks, lures, nets. They entangle wildlife, seabirds, turtles, marine mammals. They can persist for hundreds of years, or they break down into microplastics or leach harmful chemicals like lead from sinkers. It's a depressingly common sight along coastlines everywhere, so it's absolutely crucial to inspect your equipment before and after every single trip. Check your lines for any fraying or weak spots. Safely dispose of any rusted or damaged hooks. Don't just toss them overboard or leave them on the shore. A simple but really impactful change many people can make is replacing traditional lead sinkers with non-toxic alternatives, like steel or stone.
Okay, good tip.
Beyond maintenance, think about promoting reuse and durability. Avoid single-use plastic items associated with fishing if you can. Diligently recycle all packaging from new gear. And maybe invest in quality gear that's built to last, rather than cheap stuff that breaks easily and needs replacing constantly. If a line does get tangled or broken off underwater or on rocks, make every reasonable effort to retrieve it, especially that nearly invisible monofilament line. You can keep ghost fishing, catching, and killing creatures for years after you've lost it. Taking responsibility for your gear, even lost gear, is absolutely part of taking responsibility for your place within that larger ecosystem.
Right. So, okay, let's say we've followed the advice, used sustainable techniques, maintained our gear, and we've responsibly caught a fish or two that we intend to keep. What's the thoughtful way to approach that next stage? What to eat? What to release? How do we make wise choices there?
Well, food is one of our most intimate connections with nature, isn't it? And when we fish, we're engaging directly with the ocean's life, its energy. That connection really should be built on profound respect and understanding. One key principle from the guide is about eating lower on the food chain. It's a hugely efficient ecological choice.
Explain that a bit more.
Think of the marine ecosystem like a pyramid. At the broad base, you have plankton and algae, then small fish that eat those, then bigger fish that eat the small fish, and so on, up to the apex predators at the top. Eating the abundant, fast-growing, smaller fish near the bottom of that pyramid, things like sardines, anchovies, maybe some types of mullet, means you're taking from a level that replenishes much, much faster. It doesn't fundamentally weaken the whole structure in the same way as taking out the top predators does.
And there's a health angle too, right?
Yes, absolutely. As a bonus, these smaller, shorter-lived fish generally have much lower levels of accumulated toxins, like mercury, compared to the large, long-lived predators at the top, where those toxins biomagnify up the food chain. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason why those large predators should ideally be left alone is critical. They play absolutely crucial roles in regulating the whole marine food web. They control populations of mid-level species, preventing things from getting out of balance.
Like keeping herbivores in check on a reef.
Exactly. Their absence can lead to reefs being completely smothered by algae because the grazers are gone, or populations of their prey species exploding unchecked, causing other problems. And from a purely reproductive standpoint, imagine one big old female grouper or snapper. She's like a swimming egg factory. Over her lifetime, she'll produce literally millions more eggs, often higher quality eggs too, than a smaller, younger fish.
Exponentially more.
Right. So taking her, while maybe tempting because she's large, represents a far greater loss to the future generations and the overall genetic resilience of that population. And sadly, many of these large predators are already in steep decline globally due to commercial fishing pressure and sometimes targeted tourism activities. The guide puts it beautifully. Large predators are not trophies. They are teachers, survivors, and silent protectors of the marine world.
That really does shift your perspective, doesn't it? Thinking of them as protectors. So, okay, we've made our responsible choice. We have our catch, maybe some of those smaller, more abundant species. How can we honor that catch fully in the kitchen? What about recipes from the sea with minimal waste?
This is such an important, often overlooked part of the cycle. Every single discarded part of a fish represents wasted life and wasted energy from the ocean. Traditional coastal communities understood this deeply. They utilized pretty much every part of the fish. Nothing went to waste, if possible.
What kind of thing?
Well, fish heads and bones make incredibly rich, nutritious soups and broths. Fish skins, if scaled, can be pan-fried until they're super crispy, like fish bacon almost.
Oh, interesting.
Even things like the roe, the eggs can be a delicacy.
Mm.
The collars or wings have great meat. Grilling smaller fish whole eliminates filleting waste altogether. And if you have leftovers, think about traditional methods like drying or salting to preserve them for later use. These aren't just, peasant practices. They are acts of profound respect for the life that was taken. The core principle here echoes the main theme. Don't take more than you can realistically cook, consume, and store properly. Eating from the sea, as the guide emphasizes, is truly a privilege. It's not a right that comes without responsibility attached.
Okay, let's widen the lens one last time out to community and conservation. How do these individual actions we've been discussing, the choices we make on the water, in the kitchen, how do they ripple through an entire community?
It's a really remarkable connection, especially highlighted in the context of remote communities in the guide. Sharing your catch is actually a traditional and incredibly powerful form of conservation.
How does sharing conserve fish?
Well, think about it. If one person goes out and has a successful day and shares their fish generously with neighbors or family, it naturally reduces the pressure on other people to go out fishing that same day or maybe the next day. It creates these vital, natural rest periods for the local waters, allowing stocks a little breathing room.
Ah, I see. It spreads the effort and reduces the overall take.
Exactly. And beyond the ecological benefit, it builds incredible trust and social balance within the community. It supports those who might be ill or elderly or maybe don't have their own boat or gear. It fundamentally makes both the sea and the community healthier and more resilient. Communities that have strong sharing traditions are often demonstrably better able to withstand hardship, whether it's environmental or economic. It's a beautiful cycle of mutual support.
That's a really lovely way to think about it. Community resilience tied directly to ocean health.
Mhm.
So building on that community aspect, how can we actively contribute to conservation by, say, educating others and setting a good example? How do we share this knowledge without sounding, preachy?
Yeah, nobody likes a lecture,
Yeah.
especially out on the water. The guide stresses that many fishers, particularly newer ones or maybe visitors, might simply be unaware of the broader consequences of their actions. They're not necessarily being malicious.
Mm-hmm.
So the most powerful tool is often leading by example, quietly, consistently. When people see you carefully measuring a fish and gently releasing one that's undersized,
Mm-hmm.
or when they notice you always avoid known breeding areas during certain times,
Mm-hmm.
or see you meticulously cleaning up not just your own bait wrappers, but maybe some other litter left behind, they learn without a single word needing to be spoken. Your actions set a quiet but really powerful standard for responsible behavior. Also, don't underestimate the power of just talking openly, casually with your neighbors, with friends, and especially with younger people about what you observe out there.
Sharing observations.
Yeah. Hey, have you noticed fewer specific fish type around this year? Or remember how big the crabs used to be? Those conversations raise awareness naturally. And children. Children are always watching.
Mm.
Ethical fishing habits, when they're modeled consistently by adults they respect, build a deep conservation ethic within them that can genuinely last a lifetime.
Right, passing it on. And one final piece of this community role, what about the sometimes tricky issue of reporting rare species or illegal activity? Why is this important, particularly in more remote areas where official oversight might be limited?
It's critical because local fishers, the people who are out there regularly, are often the very first witnesses to important ecological events, or, unfortunately, to harmful activities, especially in remote spots where conservation agencies might have very little physical presence. Reporting sightings of rare or protected species, maybe a specific type of shark or a sea turtle nesting, provides invaluable data for scientists. It helps them track biodiversity, understand population shifts, and target conservation efforts much more effectively.
So it helps the science side.
Definitely. There are often dedicated phone numbers, apps, or websites run by conservation groups or fisheries departments where you can log these sightings, sometimes anonymously if needed. Equally important, though sometimes more challenging socially, is reporting clearly illegal activity. We're talking about things like fishing with explosives or poisons, which devastate entire areas, using banned types of gear like fine mesh nets that catch everything, or people blatantly catching protected species, or fishing during officially closed seasons.
That can be tough to do in a small community.
It absolutely can be. But even anonymous reports, if there's a mechanism for that, help build a picture for authorities. Every single report contributes to the pressure for enforcement and signals that the community itself values its marine resources and wants them protected. This role as a steward, as eyes and ears on the water, it's really earned, isn't it? Through presence, through building that local knowledge, and through genuinely caring about the health of your local waters.
Wow, okay. This deep dive has really shown, I think, that sustainable fishing isn't just about, a set of techniques or following the minimum rules. It feels like it's about a fundamental, quite profound shift in how we actually relate to the sea.
That's the core of it, I believe.
It's about recognizing the sea not just as a resource for us to take from, but as a living, breathing system with its own needs, its own limits. It's about, as the guide puts it, really listening to the rhythms of nature,
Whoa.
learning when to take, yes, but also knowing when to rest, when to hold back, and drawing from that deep well of traditional wisdom we talked about.
That wisdom is crucial.
It means shifting your whole mindset, maybe, from mere consumption towards genuine connection. Turning a simple meal into something more like a ceremony, an act of gratitude. And realizing that releasing a fish sometimes isn't about giving something up. It's actually about actively investing in and helping to build a healthier future for the ocean.
A deposit, not a withdrawal.
Exactly. Ultimately, sustainability becomes a way of life, doesn't it? Not just a technique you pull out occasionally. It's about choosing simplicity, maybe. Choosing respect. Choosing presence when you're out there. You don't need to be a marine biologist or a policymaker sitting in an office to protect the ocean. You need only to care, to observe, to take only what you truly need, to respect what remains. You are part of the sea, just as the sea is part of you. Let your fishing be mindful. Let your meals be humble. Let your presence on the coast be a gift, not a wound. Because when you live in harmony with the sea, you do more than just survive. You become part of the great rhythm of life itself.